Being a part of Marvel is a dream for many actors, particularly with the success of the Avengers franchise and their solo films. However, there are a lot of actors that Marvel have refused to hire, or will never approach again because they either declined a role or badmouthed them to the press. So today on Beyond the Screen, we're going to be bringing you our list of the top 10 celebrities Marvel will never hire. Now, PSA before we begin, we have been doing a lot of will never hire lists, so you can expect some crossovers, so don't get too triggered if you see some familiar names. Also, be sure to stick around until the end of the video where I'll be responding to some of your comments. And with that, let's jump in. Coming in at 10, Ronda Rousey. For a very long time it was up in the air about who would be playing Captain Marvel. We were left in the dark before it was finally announced that Brie Larson would be taking on the role, which of course fans were very happy about, and quite honestly she blew it away. Anyway, when Marvel announced that Captain Marvel would be getting a solo film, a handful of celebrities came forward expressing their interest in the role. One of those celebs being UFC fighter Ronda Rousey, and she was perhaps the most vocal out of them all. The fighter stated back in 2015 that she would love to take on the role, however it didn't help her cause. Fans however did jump on board, creating impressive fan art of Rousey as the superhero, however her attempts failed. Though Kevin Feige stated that she would be an interesting choice, the studio instead opted for Brie Larson, and I think it's for the best that they did. It's a smart choice opting for the Academy Award winner over a former UFC fighter. That's all I'm gonna say. Coming in at 9, John Travolta. Now it's no surprise that Travolta is on our list. He has suffered a lot of personal misguided activities, specifically his membership in the Church of Scientology. Of course, it was the catalyst that led to the demise of his acting career, and it's doubtful that we will ever see him star in a big box office movie, let alone a Disney film. Not only that, but there have been a handful of accusations of assault against the actor, which is a big no-no. Travolta has even allegedly plugged his own religious beliefs in a handful of his movies, which goes against everything that Disney believe in. Dude, you have to learn to separate your personal life from your work life. Because of this, it's become nearly impossible for Travolta to land any big role, and it's doubtful that we will ever see him appear in any Marvel film in the future. In at 8, Joaquin Phoenix. Gladiator star Joaquin Phoenix was one of the many names thrown around when Marvel were casting Doctor Strange before Benedict Cumberbatch took on the role. However, before it was announced, many accounts were predicting that Phoenix would claim the role. Sadly though, he just didn't want it. In an interview with Time Out London, he stated that he didn't see himself meshing well with the big franchise. I quote, "They've gotten better. I flirted with several of those films, having meetings and getting close, but ultimately it never felt like they'd really be fulfilling." Whoa, okay, fair enough. Now, Joaquin has jumped over to the DC side of things, and is taking on the role of the Joker in his self-titled solo film, so it's unlikely that Phoenix will ever be called in for another meeting with the Marvel Giants. Not that he needs it. In at 7, Russell Crowe. Long before we saw X-Men on the big screen, the movie was bouncing around the cosmos for a long time, with James Cameron originally set to produce alongside his then wife Catherine Bigelow, who was set to direct. The movie was also set to star Bob Hoskins as Wolverine and Angela Bassett as Storm. The latter would have been absolutely incredible. However, when the script finally landed in the hands of Bryan Singer, his first choice to play Logan was Russell Crowe. However, Crowe turned it down and instead suggested that they take a look at fellow Aussie actor Hugh Jackman, who at that time had only 2 small roles. It was a great move on the part of Crowe. However, as we know, when you decline the role in a Marvel related film, you ain't getting another shot, at least not if you're Russell Crowe. Coming in at number 6, Matt Damon. Before Ben Affleck took on the role of Daredevil, the script was bouncing around for a while, with the property ending up at Fox at some point during its development. Both Damon and Affleck were outspoken about their love of the character, with Affleck even writing the introduction to a collection of Kevin Smith's Guardian Devil run from the comics. However, Damon was the first one to be approached to play the title role of the masked hero for Fox. Damon stated in a 2015 interview that, I quote, "For us it was always Daredevil. That's the comic we read when we were kids. But when that one came along, I chickened out because I couldn't tell. I hadn't seen the director work and I didn't know, so I just said no. Ben was like, I gotta do it. And the movie ended up doing very well, even though I don't think Ben was ultimately very proud of it." Well, Matt Damon, quite honestly, no one was proud of that movie, and it ended up being a huge flop. It's interesting to imagine what it would have looked like with Damon at its helm, but honestly the script was weak from the beginning and even he wouldn't have been able to save it. Coming in at number 5, Emily Blunt. Before there was Scarlett Johansson, there was Emily Blunt. Believe it or not, that's right. The Devil Wears Prada star was the original choice for the role of Black Widow in Iron Man 2. But not only only did Blunt reject it once, she rejected it twice, which would have seen her star in Iron Man 2, Captain America Winter Soldier, and Captain America Civil War, as well as all of the Avengers. Quite the hefty resume indeed. However, it conflicted with another project she was working on, so she turned it down. Marvel approached Blunt yet again when it came time to cast the role of Peggy Carter in Captain America the First Avenger. Once again, she turned it down. Declining roles with Marvel that many times surely isn't looking good for Blunt if she ever decides she wants to get her toes wet, so it's unlikely that we would ever see her taking on the role of a superhero anytime soon. Although, some fans out there are putting her name forward for the role of Sue Storm in Fantastic Four. We shall see though. I'm unsure. Coming in at 4, Tom Cruise. During the days of the Cannon Group, a company that attempted many times to create their own Spider-Man movie, at one point even buying the rights from Marvel for the low price of $225,000. The group dreamed of making the movie with Tom Cruise as the lead, Bob Hoskins as Doc Ock, and Lauren Bacall as Aunt May. Weird, I know. However, Cruise of course passed on the project, but the film almost came to fruition in late 1988. However, 2 weeks before filming, the Cannon Group rights renewal check to Marvel bounced, which drew the end of the dream project. However, this wasn't the only time Cruise's name popped up alongside a Marvel hero. Oh no. Iron Man was another Marvel project that was kicked around long before the 2008 Robert Downey Jr. film. It was in development hell for years, bouncing around to Universal before being offered up to everyone, even Quentin Tarantino and Joss Whedon. Now, there were a handful of actors that almost claimed the role, even Timothy Olyphant, Clive Owen, and Nicolas Cage. However, Tom Cruise seemed to be the one that came closest to attaining the role before it eventually went to RDJ. Cruise reportedly walked away from the Iron Man role because he didn't like where the script ended up, which I'm sure he regrets now, considering the success of the MCU and the Iron Man movies. With such a big rejection, I'm sure we'll never see Tom Cruise come that close to attaining a role in the Marvel film again, and rightly so. In at 3, Henry Cavill. It's no secret that Marvel and DC are enemies, constantly at odds with one another, battling it out at the box office, with Marvel always coming out on top. So of course you're not going to be seeing a big name DC hero in a Marvel film anytime soon, especially not Henry Cavill, who has become famous for taking on the role of the Man of Steel. It's not so much that Marvel has anything against Cavill, but he has established himself as a recognizable superstar. When people see him, they see Superman. Not only that, but there were also rumors that Cavill's salary is extremely high. Yes, Marvel have the budget, and they have hired stars like Brie Larson, Robert Downey Jr. and Benedict Cumberbatch. However, Cavill just doesn't have the star power that these actors do. He needs to establish himself a little more if he's ever going to hop on over to Marvel. In at 2, Terrence Howard. Terrence Howard is perhaps the most famous case we have on our list. As most of you will remember, in Iron Man he played the role of Rhodey, long before it went to Don Cheadle. Howard reportedly made $3.5 million for the role, with the promise of an extra $5 million if a sequel got greenlit, and of course it did. He was one of the first of the leading roles to be cast in the original film before Robert Downey Jr. came along, with Howard taking a $1 million pay cut to help persuade Marvel to hire the actor. However, when Iron Man 2 rolled around, the producers reportedly went to Howard's agent informing them that his role was being reduced. Reportedly, his agent said, "F you," and hung up the phone, and within 24 hours Howard had been replaced by Don Cheadle. Can understand his upset at a role being reduced, but what he was really upset about was that he wasn't the shining star. I mean, when you're in a film called Iron Man, of course Iron Man would be front and center. Just chill out. And lastly, in at number 1, Matthew McConaughey. Matthew McConaughey is a highly sought after actor. Of course, it's no surprise that he has seen many Marvel and DC scripts fly across his desk. However, back in October 2015 during an interview with Variety, he stated that he had passed on a major Marvel role. Fast forward to 2017, he told Playboy that the role he ultimately rejected was that of Ego the Living Planet, explaining to the publication that he opted for Stephen King's The Dark Tower instead. He stated, I quote, "I like the Guardians of the Galaxy, but what I saw was, it's successful, and now we've got room to make a colourful part for another big name actor. I'd feel like an amendment." Well, shots fired. I imagine it's hard to jump into a well-established franchise, but I can't help but think how amazing McConaughey would have been in the Marvel movie. However, with comments like that, it's doubtful that Marvel will ever come knocking on his door again. And honestly, at this point, they don't need to. Well, there we have it. Do you guys agree with our list? Were there any celebrities that we missed? Leave us all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below. Before I go though, I just want to respond to a few comments from one of our last videos. Top 10 Avengers Endgame Easter eggs you missed. Phantasm65 said, "Man, you're so pretty, why don't you have over 1 million subscribers?" Because looks don't equal views, but thank you, I appreciate the compliment. Jeffrey Lane said, "Lol, what gave it away that Captain Marvel was gay? Lol, I would never have guessed that." Well, it definitely hasn't been confirmed, but I'm hoping that her alternative lifestyle haircut is all the confirmation we need. Fingers crossed. She's hella gay. Her and Valkyrie, I ship it. Question mark said, seen it and I was blown away. Agreed, me too. It was by far the best Marvel movie to date. I don't see them topping it. If you haven't already, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another Beyond the Screen vid. And until next time, see you later.